Dante Marchetti slammed the folder shut before Alina Rossi could see the numbers inside. His hands were steady, as always, but something in his chest had gone tight the moment she stepped into his office 10 minutes late. Alina Rossi was never late, not once in 2 years. She apologized quickly, set his coffee on the desk, and started listing his afternoon meetings, but Dante was not listening. He was watching the small ways she had changed that morning. Her hair was different. Her voice had a lightness he did not recognize. She kept checking her phone and smiling at something on the screen before catching herself and putting it away. Dante Marchetti ran 3 city blocks of shipping companies that were fronts for something far more dangerous, and men twice his size flinched when he raised his voice. Yet here he was, unsettled by a woman refilling his coffee cup. He asked her in the flattest tone he could manage if everything was fine at home. Alina looked up, surprised by the question, and said everything was fine, better than fine actually. She said she had something exciting happening this weekend, someone she had been wanting to see for a long time. She did not explain further. She simply smiled again, gathered his files, and walked out of the office. Dante sat there staring at the closed door for a long moment. He told himself it did not matter. Alina Rossi was his assistant. She managed his calendar, screened his calls, kept his enemies guessing about his next move. She was not his to question about weekend plans. But the thought would not leave him alone. He remembered the small things now, things he had never let himself notice before. The way she stayed late without being asked when he was under pressure. The way she once stood between him and a man with a raised voice in the lobby, unafraid, as if protecting him came naturally to her. The way she remembered his mother's birthday when his own brother forgot it. He had built walls around himself for years, and somehow, without asking permission, Alina Rossi had found a way past every one of them. By the time evening came, Dante could not concentrate on anything. His right-hand man, Nathan Cole, came in with reports about a rival family moving shipments through their territory, and Dante barely absorbed a word of it. His mind kept circling back to Alina and her secret plans, and the stranger she was smiling about on her phone. Nathan noticed his boss was somewhere else entirely and asked if something was wrong. Dante waved him off, saying it was nothing, just business. But it was not business. It was something sharper, something he did not have a name for yet, twisting quietly beneath his calm exterior. When Alina finally left the office that night, Dante watched her walk to her car from the window, phone pressed to her ear, laughing at something. He told himself again that it meant nothing. He almost believed it. Until he found himself reaching for his own car keys, telling himself he simply needed fresh air, when really, some part of him had already decided he needed to know exactly who was making Alina Rossi smile like that. The city lights blurred past his windshield as he pulled out of the parking garage, following the taillights of her car ahead of him, unable to explain, even to himself, why his heart was pounding the way it was. Dante Marchetti was a man who controlled everything around him. Tonight, for the first time in years, he was about to lose that control completely. Alina's car turned onto a quiet street lined with small restaurants, warm lights glowing from their windows, and Dante slowed his car half a block behind her, telling himself this was simply caution, nothing more. He watched her park, step out, and smooth down her dress before walking toward a restaurant with soft, golden lighting spilling onto the sidewalk. She looked happy in a way he rarely saw at the office, lighter somehow, like a weight had lifted off her shoulders the moment she left work behind. Dante parked across the street and told himself he would only stay a minute, just long enough to be sure everything was fine. Then he saw him. A tall man in a dark blue shirt stood from a table near the window and opened his arms as Alina walked in. She hugged him warmly, laughing at something he said before they both sat down together. The man reached across the table and took her hand for a brief moment, and Alina did not pull away. Something inside Dante went cold and hot at the same time. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned pale, watching through the glass as the two of them leaned toward each other, talking closely, the candle between them flickering against their faces. He could not hear a single word, but he did not need to. The ease between them said enough. Dante had faced armed rivals without blinking. He had negotiated deals where one wrong word could have ended his life. Nothing had ever made his hands shake the way they were shaking now. He told himself to drive away. He told himself this was exactly why he never let anyone close, why he kept every relationship strictly professional, why he built walls no one was supposed to climb. And yet here he was, sitting in a dark car like a stranger, watching the one person who had somehow slipped past every wall he owned. Inside the restaurant, Alina laughed again, tilting her head back, completely unaware that the man she worked for was outside in the shadows, jaw clenched so tightly it ached. Dante did not know the stranger's name. He did not know how long they had known each other, or what he meant to her. All he knew was a burning need to know everything, and a matching fury at not having the right to ask. For years, Dante Marchetti had convinced himself that Alina's loyalty belonged entirely to him, quietly, without ever needing to be spoken aloud. Watching her now, glowing under someone else's attention, shattered that illusion completely. He sat there until the two of them finished their meal, until the man walked Alina back to her car, until he leaned in and hugged her goodbye, lingering just a moment too long for Dante's comfort. Only when her car disappeared around the corner did Dante finally start his engine, his mind a storm of jealousy and something far more unfamiliar, something that felt dangerously close to fear. Fear of losing something he had never even admitted he wanted to keep. He drove home in silence. The image of that hand covering Alina's on the table burned into his mind, refusing to fade no matter how hard he tried to push it away. By morning, Dante had convinced himself the anger was about something else entirely, something safer to name. He told himself it was about focus, about her judgment, about the risks of an assistant who knew his secrets getting close to a stranger he had never vetted. He almost believed that too. Alina arrived at the office early, humming quietly as she organized his schedule, still glowing from the night before. She greeted him warmly, the same way she always did, completely unaware of what he had seen. Dante's response was cold enough to stop her mid-sentence. He criticized a report she had prepared days earlier, one he had already approved without complaint. He questioned decisions she had made on his behalf for months without issue. His voice stayed level, but every word carried an edge she had never heard from him before, not even during their worst crises. Alina's confusion quickly shifted into something firmer. She asked him directly what was actually wrong, since none of this matched the man she had worked beside for 2 years. Dante told her nothing was wrong, that she was simply too distracted lately to notice her own mistakes. The word distracted landed harder than he intended, and he saw it register on her face. Alina straightened, her voice steady despite the hurt flickering behind her eyes. She reminded him that she had never once let her personal life interfere with her work, and asked what exactly he was accusing her of. Dante had no honest answer he was willing to give, so he retreated further into sharpness, telling her perhaps she needed to decide where her priorities actually stood. The office fell silent except for the sound of her breathing, quick and uneven, as she absorbed the unfairness of it. She asked quietly this time if this was about the dinner. Dante's silence answered for him, and something in Alina's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. She said she did not owe him an explanation about her personal life, and yet, because his accusation was so far from the truth, she gave him one anyway. The man he had seen was her cousin, visiting from overseas after 3 years apart, and the dinner had been a small celebration of his engagement. Dante felt the ground shift beneath him, but pride kept his expression unreadable. He offered no apology, no explanation for following her, no acknowledgement of how badly he had misjudged the entire evening. Alina waited a moment, giving him the chance to say something honest, and when he did not, something in her posture closed off completely. She told him, in a voice far calmer than he deserved, that she would have every report corrected within the hour, and then she walked out of his office without waiting for a response. Dante sat alone in the silence that followed, replaying his own words and hating every one of them. He had let fear disguise itself as anger, and in doing so, he had hurt the one person who had never once given him a reason to doubt her. For the rest of the day, Alina kept every exchange between them strictly professional, her warmth replaced by a careful, polite distance that felt far worse than any argument. She answered his questions, delivered his messages, and avoided his eyes entirely. By evening, Dante found himself staring at his phone, drafting and deleting the same apology a dozen times, unable to find words that did not sound like an excuse. He did not yet know that within days, a far greater danger would force the truth out of him, whether he was ready to say it or not. Trouble arrived 2 days later in the form of a warning from Nathan Cole, who burst into Dante's office without knocking, his expression tight with urgency. A rival family led by a man named Victor Callahan had discovered how close Alina worked with Dante, and they intended to use that closeness against him. Nathan explained that one of their own contacts had overheard Callahan's men discussing Alina directly, planning to intercept her that evening as she left a downtown pharmacy, hoping to pressure Dante into a deal he would never otherwise accept. Every instinct Dante had built over years of running his empire sharpened into a single, urgent focus. He did not think about pride or distance or the cold way they had left things 2 days earlier. He thought only of getting to her before anyone else did. He called her twice with no answer, his pulse climbing with every unanswered ring, before grabbing his jacket and heading straight for the pharmacy Nathan had named. He arrived to find Alina stepping out onto the sidewalk, completely unaware of the two unfamiliar men positioning themselves near the corner, watching her with far too much interest. Dante crossed the street quickly, reaching her side just as one of the men started to approach, and the sight of Dante beside her was enough to make them hesitate and retreat toward a waiting car instead. Alina, startled and confused, asked what was happening, and Dante, without softening any of it, told her the truth. He explained who Victor Callahan was, why his rivals had targeted her, and how close she had just come to being used as a pawn in a war she had never asked to be part of. The color drained from Alina's face as the reality settled in, and for the first time, Dante saw real fear behind her usual composure. He guided her quickly into his car, and as they drove, the walls he had spent years building finally began to crack. He told her he never should have let his temper get the better of him after the dinner, that his anger had never truly been about her work at all. He admitted, haltingly, that seeing her with another man had frightened him more than any rival family ever had, because it forced him to face something he had refused to name for a long time. Alina listened quietly, her earlier hurt softening as she finally understood the fear hiding behind his cruelty. She told him she deserved honesty, not suspicion, and that if he ever doubted her loyalty again, he needed to simply ask her directly instead of disappearing into anger. Dante nodded, the admission costing him more than any negotiation he had ever survived. He said he understood now that keeping her at a safe distance had never actually protected either of them. It had only left room for fear to fill the silence between them. By the time they reached his home, the danger from Callahan's men still loomed ahead of them, unresolved and serious, but something had shifted permanently between Dante and Alina. The truth, once spoken, could not be unspoken again. For the first time, Dante Marchetti had let someone see him without his armor, and instead of losing her because of it, he had finally begun to understand what keeping her close might actually mean. The threat from Victor Callahan did not disappear overnight, but Dante handled it the way he handled everything, with precision and total resolve. Except this time, Alina stood beside him through every step instead of watching safely from a distance. He kept her informed rather than shielded, trusting her with details he once would have hidden, and she met that trust with the same steady loyalty she had always shown him, now finally seen and valued for what it truly was. Within a week, a quiet agreement was reached that ended Callahan's interest in using Alina as leverage, achieved through careful negotiation rather than open conflict. And for the first time in a long while, Dante felt the tight grip of constant vigilance ease slightly around his chest. One evening, once the immediate danger had fully passed, Dante asked Alina to stay after the office had emptied out, his usual confidence noticeably absent as he searched for the right words. He told her that he had spent years believing that keeping people at a distance was the only way to protect what mattered to him, and that watching her with someone else, even mistakenly, had shown him exactly how much distance he had already lost with her. Alina waited, giving him the space to finish, and he continued, telling her that she was not simply an assistant who managed his calendar and guarded his secrets. She was the one person who had made him want to be honest for the first time in years. He admitted that the jealousy she had witnessed came from something he had refused to name until fear forced it into the open, a depth of feeling he had never intended to develop but could no longer deny. Alina's expression softened completely as she listened, the hurt from days earlier finally making sense within the fuller picture of who Dante truly was underneath his control. She told him she had sensed something shifting between them for a long time, and that his honesty now meant far more to her than any apology alone ever could have. Dante reached for her hand, the same gesture he had watched jealously from across a dark street days earlier, except this time there was nothing to misunderstand and no distance left between them. He told her, plainly and without his usual guarded tone, that he wanted her beside him, not hidden away as a secret weakness, but openly acknowledged as someone essential to both his life and his world. Alina smiled, telling him she had been waiting for him to trust her enough to say exactly that. In the weeks that followed, their relationship changed openly, no longer confined to careful professionalism and unspoken tension. Dante introduced her to his closest associates not merely as his assistant, but as someone whose judgment he valued and whose place beside him was permanent. Nathan Cole, watching the shift with quiet approval, remarked that he had never seen Dante Marchetti this at ease, and Dante did not bother denying it. Alina continued managing his world with the same sharp competence she always had, but now she did it as his equal, trusted completely, protected openly, and never again mistaken for anything less than exactly what she was to him. The jealousy that had once threatened to destroy everything between them had instead become the very thing that finally brought them together, and Dante Marchetti, a man who controlled every corner of his empire, finally allowed himself to be entirely certain of one thing he would never again let slip away.